Hello, I'm Langston, and I'm back on my channel, Military Election Forecasting. I've been gone for a while, and today I'm going to be talking about the 2024 presidential election. I'm going to be giving my personal prediction. This is like my fourth, maybe fifth edition of this video. I'm not sure. Usually I keep like track, but so I'm going to be doing that. So before I get into it, I'm a very unbiased person. Y'all know that about me. Like, I might have a specific way I believe, but I'm gonna argue each way from both perspectives. I came on here and I said I think Donald Trump is underestimated as a candidate. I came on here saying Kamala Harris is underestimated as a candidate. I'm gonna give you that opinion from both perspectives. Like, I'm not gonna sit up here and put my personal beliefs into that. And I feel like on political YouTube, you should people want you to put your personal beliefs into politics. Like, if you don't really, if you're not standing, like, you know what I'm saying, like, if you're not giving the truth, people want to attack you. It's like, you know what, hey, all I'm gonna do is argue shit with actual demographic data, with actual trends. I'm not gonna argue with my fucking opinions, because my opinions is not gonna sit up here and allow someone to win. Like, I can feel how I feel all I want. That's not gonna put someone in office, if you get what I'm saying. So that's the problem I have with this space. Like, you can't for real, like, be honest without someone, saying you're doing this, doing that. And that's not the truth. So as of now, I do think Donald Trump is being overestimated in terms of as a candidate, and I'm gonna stand by that. I said he was underestimated twice. I argue with everyone on the gym on political YouTube when they said Donald Trump had no chance. I always said he had a specific chance, but I don't think Donald Trump is going to win a popular vote. I don't think a lot of these polls that are coming out, match up with the actual data, with the actual electorate of our country. So, but multiple things can be true at once, and some of y'all need to learn how to listen and actually understand, so you don't look like Boo Boo the Fool when the election results come in. Because let's just be for real, right? Like, I predicted all the Senate races correctly in 2022. Like, I'm extremely accurate at predicting my predictions. So y'all can sit up here and say, "Oh yeah, blah 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 blah." Like, you can sit up here and leave me Declaration of Independence, long comments. But at the end of the day, listen to actually some of the stuff that me and some other people are saying that aren't, being just straight biased in one specific favor. So I'm going to get into, clearing, actually making predictions for all of these states. So starting off with these safe states, I think some of these states could obviously fall under 15%. I think Illinois, as well as New Jersey, Connecticut, Delaware, as well as New Jersey could all fall under 15%. Like, if black turnout's really bad in Chicago, if Democrats really struggle with black and Hispanic turnout in New Jersey, and etc., potentially could fall under 15, as well as Oregon. Maybe if they struggle with turnout in Portland because of the pro-Palestine movement, a lot of those voters in Portland are very liberal. I think Montana, Mississippi, Missouri, Indiana could fall under 15% for Donald Trump. If Democrats do better with black turnout, which isn't the most likely thing in my opinion. In Mississippi, it could fall under 15%. Missouri, Indiana could fall under 15% with a really, really strong performance in the suburbs, right? As well as better black turnout as well in the inner cities. And Montana could fall under 15 with better youth turnout, right? So there's multiple states that I classified as safe that there's an argument for being likely, but in my opinion, they're safe in terms of probability. And I believe they will go with 15%. So now I'm going to fill out the likely states for Donald Trump. And these are the states that I think Donald Trump will win by more than 5 points, but less than 15%. So I think he'll win in Kansas, as well as Nebraska's first congressional district, as well as Florida, South Carolina, Ohio, Iowa, as well as Maine's second congressional district. So in Kansas, I think that Donald Trump will do really well in the rural areas. But the problem for Republicans in Kansas, as we've seen for a while, has been Johnson County. Like, Johnson County is rapidly trending to the left. Um, it is the richest county in Kansas as well. 25% of Kansas population lives in Johnson County. And these are voters that turn out at the highest rate in the state. And, Joe Biden's going to continue to do better with these voters. Despite his unpopularity, this is something that, is going to be a problem for a lot of Republicans in the future as well as now, is the fact that a lot of these college educated, richer, upper class white voters are going to continue trending left. The same way you're seeing non college educated white voters trend in Republicans' favor. And, I make arguments for both sides. I think you've seen a lot of delusion from the perspective of Republicans that, Trump is going to continue doing better in the working class areas, which is true. I would argue that against everyone, regardless of the candidate, Sherrod Brown, and etc. But you can't make that argument and then say the Democrats aren't going to continue to do better with college educated voters. So you're seeing the inverse for both. But in states like Kansas, that is the demographic that turns out at the highest rate. And, that is a part of Kansas that is really growing, right? So if Democrats keep doing better there, Kansas is going to continue to narrow despite the circumstances, which is why in 2016, despite Hillary Clinton doing so bad nationwide, she still did better in Kansas compared to Barack Obama. And very similar thing in Nebraska's first district, very similar demographics to Kansas. And Nebraska's first district has actually been drawn to even be more Democratic. So I think that Donald Trump will still win here by solid margins. I think that he might win Nebraska's first by like 9 points or so. Like I think it'll be 8 or 9, maybe 10. I think he'll win Kansas by like 11 or 12, maybe 10 for Trump. But I think that he'll hold on to solid margins in these states. But he's gonna struggle in the suburbs in these states like he's done both his elections, and that's gonna allow them to narrow up. In Iowa and Ohio, I think Donald Trump will do very, very well in Iowa and Ohio. I think he'll get very good numbers with the working class and with rural voters. Iowa is really gone for Democrats. They don't realistically have a demographic they're doing too well with, except maybe college educated voters, obviously, in some of the suburbs in Iowa. Not dramatically better, but you're seeing they're getting shifts, but not that many people really live in these areas, right? So, realistically, Trump's going to continue to do better in these rural areas, in these working class areas, as he's done in both election cycles. And I think that Biden can realistically lose Iowa by more than 10 points. In Ohio, I think that Donald Trump is going to really do well with working class voters, white rural voters, and etc. I think that Joe Biden will have some struggles with turning out inner city black voters in Cleveland and Columbus. And that alone will really, really hurt Democrats down ballot, in particular Sherrod Brown. Democrats struggled with black turnout in 2020 in Ohio. They still held their ground. Like they didn't do bad, but they could have did a lot better. People were expecting to do a lot better with turnout in Cleveland and etc. And they did not do that. I think they will have some struggles this time around. And I think that Trump, like he will continue doing better in these working class areas. The only place I think that Biden would do better would be in the suburbs. But I don't think he'll do well enough in the suburbs to make up for his numbers with black turnout as well as his struggles in the working class and rural areas. So Republicans could actually win Ohio by 10%, but it's also a possibility that Democrats will improve with their numbers with black voters by the time that the election comes around, and that will allow them to have at least a decent performance in Ohio. In Maine second district, I think that Maine second district is trending dramatically to the right as well. I think Donald Trump will continue to improve in these working class and rural parts of Maine second district. He was even able to do that in some of these counties in 2020. And I think that he'll continue to do better with these working class rural voters, and that will allow Maine second district to continue trending to the right. In South Carolina and Florida, in South Carolina, I think that Biden will definitely struggle with black turnout. He did win in a landslide in the primaries, but these are high propensity black voters. I think that you saw a lot of Democrats being delusional, like, oh, black voters are still riding with Biden. And, I think that Democrats will win over 90% of the black vote, but I think they will have some real struggles with black turnout, in particular younger black voters. But even with black turnout being bad in 2016, Hillary Clinton still was able to keep South Carolina under 15%. So with that, I still think that South Carolina, it might be 13, right? It might be almost 15%, but I still think Biden will keep it under 15%. And Joe Biden will do better with some of the upper class white voters in the state, but not enough to make up for his losses with black turnout. In Florida, this is a state I think Donald Trump would do pretty well in. I don't think it would be as Republican as all these other places. I think he'll probably win Florida by like 5 or 6 points, maybe a little bit more. I think that he will do better. Maybe not better because Hispanic voters have a history of trending to incumbents. But regardless, I don't think Democrats will do well with Hispanic and Latino voters in Southern Florida. I think that they might nearly hold on in Miami-Dade, or they might win it by roughly the same. I think they'll do pretty decent in Broward County. I think they'll struggle with turnout, right? They'll do a lot better than they did in 2022. I think that they'll get decent numbers out of Palm Beach. I think that Jacksonville, it might continue turning to the left. Jacksonville's becoming a lot more black as well as a lot more college educated, and that might work in their favor. But it's also a chance that you do see turnout in Jacksonville really drop like we saw in 2022. I think that Biden would do pretty decent in Tampa and Pinellas. I think he'll do really well in Seminole County, right? Like I think he'll keep up the trends there. But regardless, I think that Trump's numbers in these panhandle counties will just be too much, and his numbers with Hispanic voters will continue netting for him. And with that, I think he will win Florida by a pretty solid margin. But I'm really curious to see the results in Florida more than any other state. So that's something I really look forward to. I forgot to also include Alaska. I think Donald Trump would do pretty well ruled voters in Alaska. I think the Democrats will continue making gains with college educated voters, as well as more moderate service members, members in the military like myself, um, as well. So that's something else I think that we will see continue happen in this race. The last thing I want to talk about is the likely states, not the last thing, but something I want to talk about is the likely states for Democrats, and that would be New Mexico as well as Minnesota, Nebraska's second district, as well as Maine, New Hampshire, and Virginia. These are practically all the likely states from 2020. So realistically, I don't think we'll see too many changes, by and large. In New Mexico, I think that Biden will continue doing better with Hispanic voters, especially being the incumbent. Oftentimes you hear a lot of Republicans saying, oh, Trump's going to do better with Hispanic voters. And, that could be possible. But realistically, Hispanic voters have shifted to every incumbent president, every single last one. So, the same thing, there were a lot of polls with Trump doing really bad with Hispanic voters. And, as when 2020 came around, that was not the case. And same thing for Barack Obama in 2012. These voters have a history of trending to incumbents regardless of the circumstances. And because of that, that's going to be a specific problem I think Donald Trump will deal with. That I don't think really realistically people talk about. People keep saying, oh, Trump's going to do better with Hispanic voters. But the math points to them continually trending to incumbents despite the circumstances. In 2020, despite the COVID-19 pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement, Trump still outperformed his number of Hispanic Latino voters in 2020 compared to 2016, right? In 2012, despite the economy being in bad shape, despite unemployment being high, Hispanic voters still trended to Obama relative to 2008, despite the circumstances. In 2004, despite the very unpopular Iraq War, despite certain issues going on in America, George W. Bush still dramatically outperforms his 2000 numbers of Hispanic voters. So you can't realistically make that argument without, looking at the actual data that points to a different result, right? And that goes for both sides. Um, in Minnesota, I could see Minnesota potentially being lean. I think that Democrats will do better in the suburbs of Minneapolis. Like as we saw, I think they'll get really good numbers in the suburbs of Minneapolis. But I do think they might struggle with inner city turnout in Minneapolis and St. Paul. These are a lot of very liberal, very pro-Palestine, very left-leaning voters. Ilhan Omar represents that district, right? So realistically, with her, realistically, a lot of those voters might sit out this election because of what's going on with Israel and Palestine. I think that would really hurt Joe Biden with young voters. And because of that, I realistically could see the bad turnout in Minneapolis, the state going down to maybe a 4 to 5 point margin for Biden. But Democrats will still win pretty substantially. I do think Trump will continue doing better with working class and rural voters in Minnesota, but not enough to make up for his collapse in the suburbs, right? Um, in New Hampshire, Trump is a really bad candidate for college educated white voters in New Hampshire and Maine, and that will allow him to do pretty bad in the state. I think Joe Biden will continue to get pretty decent numbers with those voters and continue doing better the same way he did in 2020, despite his unpopularity. In Virginia, I could see Virginia potentially trending right. I think that Virginia is a left trending state, obviously. I've heard a lot of Republicans say, oh, Virginia's trending to the right. No math, no data to back that up. If you're going to sit up here and say that, stand on facts, like stand on the data because the data don't point to that. But if black turnout is really bad in Virginia, right? As we saw in 2021, Virginia can definitely trend to the right. So I'm tired of Democrats saying, "Oh yeah, the Nova's trending to the left." It's going to like if black turnout really does collapse, you could see Virginia trend to the left. I mean, trend to the right. But I don't realistically think black turnout would be that bad for it to trend to the right. I think Democrats would do worse with black turnout, but they'll do well enough in Nova, like continue doing better in the Nova counties to make up for that, right? So I think Virginia goes to Biden by like 11, 12, maybe 13%. And that's how I feel about that state. In Nebraska second district, I forgot to talk about that. Nebraska second district is this district that's trending dramatically to the left. It has been drawn to be a little bit more conservative, but I don't really think it will matter because it's still a left trending area. Nebraska second, Omaha is really growing, not really, but it's growing in a district as well as its suburbs. And as you saw, like Nebraska second trended in favor of Democrats in this election. Like you saw that Sharpie trended 10 points as well as Douglas trended 9 points to the left. And even in 2016, despite Hillary Clinton losing, she did a lot better in those counties, right? Like compared to Barack Obama. So you see the blue shifts here. So with that, I realistically think that Biden will continue to do better in Nebraska second district, despite his unpopularity, despite all the issues that he's having, because the voters in those areas are similar to Kansas, similar to Nebraska's first. They're college-educated white voters, and those voters are going to continue turning to Joe Biden despite his issues because of their anti how they feel about populism, how they feel about Donald Trump and his rhetoric, and that's going to really turn a lot of those voters off. So, those are the likely states, 226, 179. I think this is where both of these candidates realistically start going into this election. So now I'm going to be doing the lean states for Donald Trump. And I think Donald Trump only has one lean state, and that is the state of Texas. I think that Donald Trump will win Texas by like 3 points, like 3 or 4 points. I still think Democrats will continue to improve in Texas. In 2016, Hillary Clinton did 7 points better than Barack Obama, despite losing nationwide. So, I hear people saying, oh, Republicans are going to make gains in Texas, and I don't realistically agree with that. I think that they will definitely do better. Not better. I think they'll do really well in the rural working class areas. I can see Joe Biden improving in the Rio Grande Valley, not dramatically, just because of shifts to incumbents, right? But realistically, I still think that he will Biden will struggle with turnout in Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio. But the thing is, Democrats have been struggling with turnout in those areas, and they've still been able to continue turning the state to the left because Democrats are already at the floor. Like, they don't realistically have too much worse they can do because they're not even really hitting the numbers they should be hitting in Texas. So because of that, like, I still think Republicans will win pretty comfortably, but I think that the margin will go down. The same we've seen in both elections. I do think Joe Biden will do really well in Williamson County. Like, I think he'll get really good numbers in Williamson County. He did how much better here? He did 11 points better. Like, I think he'll do really well in Collin and Denton County. I think he'll cut into the margins in Montgomery as well. Not enough, but I think that he'll probably flip Colin. I think that he'll either nearly win Denton or he'll Donald Trump will either nearly hold on to Denton or lose Denton, right? Like, I think that he'll do pretty well in Williamson County. I think that he'll cut the margin in Montgomery, but I still think that, Donald Trump will just do too well in the working class and rural areas, and Democrats will struggle too much with inner city Black and Hispanic turnout to realistically win. And, Democrats are really struggling with Hispanic turnout in the Southwest. Like, the population, the share of the electorate that is Hispanic versus the population is Hispanic is a dramatic difference. Democrats need to do a lot better with Hispanic turnout in some of these Southwestern states, and they're failing to do that. But I still think Donald Trump will hold on to a pretty comfortable victory in the state. Going on to the lean states for Joe Biden, I have three, the same ones I had for my last election. I have Nevada, Arizona, as well as Michigan. I could see Arizona going down the tilt, but I'm going to keep it as lean, as well as potentially even Michigan. In Nevada, I've heard a lot of Republicans make the argument that Nevada trending to the right. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that what we saw is Hillary Clinton was a bad candidate in 2016, and Hispanic voters trend to incumbents. So because Donald Trump got the incumbent boost, he was able to keep Nevada somewhat stagnant from 2020, 2016. But Clark County is growing. It's becoming a lot more diverse, a lot more Hispanic, a lot more Black, a lot more Asian, in particular Hispanic. And these are all demographic groups that do not vote in favor of the GOP. And even if Republicans improve a little bit amongst those voters, there's still more of them in the electorate. And the more of them there are, the more Democratic votes there are to offer, despite doing a little bit worse with them. So because of that, like, I think if Hispanic turnout is just horrible in Vegas, it's possible, but I don't agree with that. Like, in 2022, turnout was really bad in Clark County. And I want to say I don't think Joe Biden will ever get Captain Cortez Masto numbers with Hispanic voters. Captain Cortez Masto is a lot stronger of a candidate for Hispanic voters than Joe Biden. But regardless, like, I still think that Joe Biden would do well enough with those voters to realistically hold on to a 2 to 3 point margin victory in the state, despite his circumstances. In Arizona, I think that Arizona is a state that really hates Donald Trump and Trump-like candidates, and we saw this in 2022, where despite the circumstances, Katie Hobbs still was able to win in this race, and that really shocked the nation because I got all my races right for the most part in 2022, but I did expect Katie Hobbs to lose because Katie Hobbs was such a bad candidate, and she was still able to defeat a Trump-like candidate in Kerry Lake. And despite Joe Biden's issues, Joe Biden is a better candidate than Katie Hobbs. I don't think anyone can ever sit up here and say that. Like, Joe Biden has a lot more appeal to a lot of these moderate voters in the Maricopa County area that Katie Hobbs did not have access to. And even with that, those voters still broke for Katie Hobbs over someone like Carrie Lake. So a lot of people keep attacking Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom, a lot of other Democrats. People need to realize that a lot of these moderate voters will still vote in favor of they will still vote in favor of someone like Katie Hobbs over over a Trump like Republican. So because of that, like Joe Biden will still get good numbers in these suburbs. I think that he might struggle. Like Katie Hobbs outperformed Joe Biden in almost all of these suburban counties. So with that, like Joe Biden, he will do better in the suburbs of Maricopa. I think that he might struggle with turnout in Phoenix and Tucson, but realistically, so did Democrats in 2022. Like the electorate in 2022 was a Trump electorate, and Democrats were still losing because Trump is losing a lot of these moderate voters. And you saw this in 2016, where Hillary Clinton, despite being a horrible candidate, she still did 6 points better than Barack Obama in Maricopa County. Like Maricopa still trended to the left. So because of that, like I don't realistically think that you know, despite Biden's unpopularity, like he will still do better in Arizona just because of the electorate there that's really anti-Trump, as well as Arizona becoming a lot more Hispanic, a lot more minority majority, right? It's becoming a minority majority state. The last state is Michigan. And Michigan is the last state I think a lot of Republicans really overestimate, as well as some Democrats. Like a lot of people are really overestimating the electoral power of Arabic voters in Dearborn. Like Dearborn only cast 20,000 votes. Like, stop acting like Arab voters make up 20% of Michigan's electorate. They don't make up that large of a chunk of Michigan's population to make that dramatic of a difference in the results. Like, I'm so tired of hearing about that. And I do think that, like I said, I think that the Palestine issue will really hurt Biden with young voters, but it's not going to hurt him dramatically in Michigan. The problem for Joe Biden in Michigan will be black turnout in Detroit, as well as in Flint and Saginaw. Like I think that he will lose Saginaw. The only reason he was able to flip Saginaw was because black turnout dramatically went up and it was able to nearly flip the county. So I think that he'll lose Saginaw County, but it won't matter. He only won the county by 300 votes. So if you know what I'm saying, like that won't really hurt him too much. I think that the margin in Flint might go down as well. And Flint is also losing population. I think that Detroit, like Wayne County, like the turnout will definitely go down. I don't think it'll go down dramatically, but I think it will go down, right? Like pretty sizable. And I think Trump will do a lot better in the working class and rural areas, the same way he was able to in 2020. I think he'll get good numbers in these working class rural parts of Michigan. But the problem for Donald Trump, as well as it was even in 2016, like in 2016, Hillary Clinton still did better in the suburbs, right? Like she didn't do dramatically better, but she still did better in Oakland County. Like she still did better in Kent. Like she still did better in Kent County compared to 2000 compared to Barack Obama. So because of that, like I think Joe Biden he'll probably win Oakland by like 18, 20 points. He'll probably win Kent by more than 10. And with that, like that will be able to negate a lot of his struggles with black turnout. Like you have to realize he won Michigan by 150,000 votes. So like even with bad black turnout, like he should still be able to hold on in the state because of his gains in the suburbs. So because of that, like I still think it would be competitive. Like I think it could go down a tilt. Like if black turnout just really collapses in the inner cities in Michigan, you could see a 0.8, 0.9% margin. But the math does not math for Trump to be winning in Michigan. So y'all go sit up here and say Trump winning in Michigan. Like how is Trump gonna win? Like what's the math? Like what's the coalition that Trump can put together to win in Michigan? Right? Like so you can't sit up here and make this argument. As well as these bullshit ass polls that's coming out talking about, oh, Trump gonna win 20, 30% of the black vote. Like that's not gonna happen. I hate to be the one to tell y'all, but that's not gonna happen. But I also don't think the Democrats will do better with these working class voters in a presidential election against Donald Trump on a ballot. Period. Right. So for the tilt states for Donald Trump, I think Donald Trump has three tilt states. These are three. Two of them are flips for Donald Trump. I think that he'll win North Carolina by a tilt margin, as well as Georgia. I think that's a flip, as well as Wisconsin. And Georgia and Wisconsin, there's a lot of delusion going on the Democratic side. Like a lot of Democrats are delusional, especially in Georgia. I keep hearing Democrats talk about, oh, Atlanta's becoming a lot more black. The Atlanta metro area has a lot more black people moving there. You know, a lot of college educated voters are going to continue turning in favor of Democrats. And I think that's true to an extent, but you have to realize that a lot of these black people that are moving to Georgia, they don't approve of Joe Biden in their home state. So if they live in New York, if they live in California, they don't like Joe Biden in California, New York, right? They're not going to vote for him in New York or California. Why are they going to move to Georgia and vote for Joe Biden when they wouldn't vote for him in New York. So yes, there's a lot of people moving to Atlanta, but the people moving to Atlanta are going to vote for Joe Biden either because they don't approve of him in their home state. So that doesn't really help Joe Biden too much. I think it'll help him a little bit, but not enough. And I think Joe Biden would do better in these college educated counties, like these white exurban counties, like Forsyth, Hall, Cherokee. Like I think he'll do better in these counties. I think that's realistic. Like I think we'll see that. As well. Like, I don't think anyone can deny that. I'll be the first one to say that. But you have to realize, like, he's not going to do dramatically better. Like, I think he'll do a couple points better there. But you saw Herschel Walker, he still held his ground in these areas. Like, it doesn't matter about Trump scandals. Like, he might be on trial in a state. That's not going to matter. Like, over 70% of white voters in Georgia still vote for Republicans. And that's not going to really see hurt Trump too much despite his scandals. I think that Gwinnett and Cobb, like, I think Biden will do a little bit better there as well. But no, the main parts of Gwinnett and Cobb that are trending to the left are the parts that are becoming rapidly more black. We're talking about Marietta, Snellville, like southern Gwinnett, southern Cobb. And if Biden really collapses with turnout there, these counties might not even trend to the left. I still think that, they'll trend to the left a little bit, as well as Henry, like, Douglas Canada. The demographics are changing so fast in Rockdale, some of these counties, that there's nothing that Donald Trump can really do to stop it. But I think that where Biden will really struggle will be in these inner cities. Like, I think that he'll really struggle in Fulton, DeKalb, and Clayton with black turnout. Like, I think he'll really struggle there. I think he'll do really well in North Fulton with college-educated white voters. But I don't think it'll be enough to make up for the turnout drops in black turnout, right? Which makes up more than 60% of the votes that Democrats get statewide. Joe Biden will also really struggle in the black belt, in these rural black counties. Realistically, I don't think it will hurt him too much because there's not that many people that live here anyway. But it's still something to point out. And Donald Trump would do so well with white rural voters that with that, I think that Democrats will go down in Georgia. I think people keep talking about, oh, Trump's such a weak candidate for Georgia. And I don't agree with that. Like, Georgia is a state that's becoming rapidly more black, and there's nothing Republicans can really do to stop that. So unless they can stop black people from voting, or dramatically decrease black turnout, like they're going to lose the state. Period. Right. But I still think that Donald Trump is a very strong candidate for white rural voters, and with Biden's black turnout problems, he will definitely lose Georgia by a narrow margin. And I said what I said. In North Carolina, I think that North Carolina. I think Democrats have a better chance in Georgia because Democrats have a more diverse coalition in North Carolina. Like white voters in North Carolina are more liberal than in Georgia. They have a higher floor, right? And we saw in 2022, despite black turnout being really bad in North Carolina, Democrats only lost by 3. In Georgia, they lost the turnout battle by 6. So realistically, like Democrats can only fall so far in North Carolina. I think Joe Biden will struggle with black turnout, but he struggled with it in 2020 as well, and he still was able to, do better than Hillary Clinton. So I think that Democrats will do better in like Cabarrus County. I think the Democrats will do a lot better there. Like they did pretty well. I think they'll do well in the Research Triangle. I think they'll struggle with black turnout in Charlotte, Raleigh, like some in Greensboro, like some of these inner cities. Not dramatically compared to what they did in 2020, but I think they'll still struggle, and that will allow Trump to narrowly win the state. That's also doing really well in the white rural parts of the state as well. But I still think North Carolina will be close, despite Biden's unpopularity, just because of how high Democrats' floor is in the state. Like Democrats are already doing bad with black turnout, they're already doing bad with their base in North Carolina, and they're still competitive. So I don't think Joe Biden has too far to fall in terms of his performance. I still think he'll outperform his 2020 performance, just because Democrats are already hitting the floor in the state, right? In Wisconsin, this is another state Democrats are really delusional about. Like a lot of Democrats keep saying Biden's going to do well in the wild counties, which is true. I think Biden will definitely do better in the wild counties. But like, let's be for real. Like, he's not going to do that much better. Like, he lost Wild by 50,000. Let's say he loses Wild by 45. Like, he only gave 5,000 votes in Wild County. Like, that's not going to make that big of a difference. Like, the votes in Ozaki, like, there's just not that many votes here, and these areas aren't trending fast enough to the left to make up for how bad Biden's going to do with black turnout in Milwaukee. I think Biden will also struggle with youth turnout in Madison. Like a lot of these voters in Madison are very pro-Palestine, very liberal, and they're not going to turn out for Joe because of that. And I think that also we already know the working class voters are going to trend dramatically to Trump. But I'm tired of Democrats talking about these wild counties. Like there's just not that many votes in these counties to make up for bad black turnout in Milwaukee. Even if turnout in Milwaukee collapses, the wild counties don't even make up enough of the electorate to make up for that, let alone bad turnout in Madison. So realistically, I think Biden is going to lose in Wisconsin. I think it'll be close, but I don't realistically see the math for him to win in the state. Y'all need to argue with math and data. Like one thing about me, like I have my beliefs. I'm gonna argue with math. The math don't point to Biden winning in Georgia. The data don't point to that, right? The math don't point to Biden losing in Michigan. So I'm gonna argue with math. I don't care about my own personal beliefs regardless of who I root for, I'm gonna argue with the data. The last thing I want to categorize is Pennsylvania. And this is why I think Joe Biden is still favored to win the election because I think Joe Biden will still narrowly win in Pennsylvania. And for Republicans, that's unfortunate for them. But the math does not point to Trump winning in Pennsylvania. I think that he'll get close. I could see him winning, which is why I think he still has a chance. But because of that, like I still think that the math ain't there for him. Like when looking at the data, like I think he'll do really well in the rural areas. I think he'll continue making gains in working class areas. Like he might flip Erie County. He might do a lot better in Scranton. Like I think he'll cut the margin in Scranton. We got to realize Biden only won Scranton by 9,000 votes. He won Erie by less than 2,000 votes. So that's only 11,000 votes. Joe Biden won Pennsylvania by 81,000, right? So that's just not like you add all that shit up. Like the math ain't math to what y'all are trying to say. And I think that Democrats, right, like I think Democrats, like what will save them will be the Philadelphia suburbs. Like these Philadelphia suburbs are going to continue trending to the left, despite the circumstances, especially Chester, Montgomery, like Delaware, Chester. I think Biden will win Chester by more than 20 points. I think that he'll win Montgomery by like 30. I think he'll win Delaware by pushing 30 as well. And in 2022, Fetterman is a horrible candidate for the suburbs. Like, horrible candidate. Don't even want to wear suits. Like, was dealing with a stroke. Like, Fetterman was a really bad candidate for the suburbs. And even still, he was able to match Joe Biden and outperform him in the suburbs. And because of that, like, I don't realistically see, like, what Democrat Republicans can really do because these suburbs are going to continue to turn to the left. 2016, despite Hillary Clinton losing, just like Michigan and Wisconsin, she still did better in the suburbs. The problem for Hillary Clinton was that she did not net the numbers that Biden was netting in the suburbs to win statewide. If she would have got Biden numbers in the suburbs, she would have won the state despite collapsing in the rural working class areas, right? And getting horrible black turnout. So because of that, like only way for Trump to realistically win in Pennsylvania would be for black turnout to just fall off of a complete cliff. Like if you see black turnout just completely collapse, now we're talking. And I think that's possible, but I don't think that's the most likely scenario. Like I still think Joe Biden will hold up well enough for black turnout to narrowly win in Pennsylvania. But that's Trump's only way. Like also, maybe if turnout in Pittsburgh drops, I don't think that's likely. I think Biden will do too well in the suburbs of Allegheny to necessarily negate that. I think Trump will come close, but the numbers aren't there. We saw this in the Supreme Court election as well, where Democrats got good numbers in the suburbs. Like they were able to do better in these suburban counties. Like, they won Montgomery by 32 points. And Carla Coluccio, she was from Montgomery County and still lost by 32. So something that I say, I don't think that a lot of these local races will have an impact on Joe Biden. Like I think Joe Biden has a unique problem with his own base. But regardless, like I think that Biden will do enough with these college-educated white suburban voters and the suburbs to hold up in Pennsylvania. Unless black turnout just really collapses in Philadelphia, which is possible, but I don't think it's the most likely scenario, right? That's the only way Trump can realistically win the presidency. But that's all I have to say in the 2024 presidential election prediction. So thank you guys so much for tuning into my to this video. Make sure you have a nice day, you guys. Please like, comment, and subscribe down below. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. Have a nice day, you guys. Goodbye.